the Swamp Thing issue 16, Ram V writing with Mike Perkins on the art. The final issue and was become one of the best Swamp Thing runs, I think. Uh, probably this and the Alan Moore run are, I think, sitting on a bit of a pedestal for me at this point.
I need to go and read that because I've never read the Alan Moore stuff.
Yeah, so I think the ideas this introduces just fit so well, and the it feels like a nice sort of like callback to the mood of that book at sometimes.
What I like here is that this is Ram V has created his own stamp on Swamp Thing, and I do like when writers are able to do that, right? Because this feels very much like kind of its own thing. And I hope other writers kind of pull from it in the future if he doesn't do anything else.
Yeah. So basically, the machines, the industry, all this stuff. It's all
Parliament of Gears.
Well, no, yeah, it's the Parliament of Gears, but I'm thinking more the city that's built around them. Like, okay. It's like it's all lumped in this area in the desert. You've got the alien plants above, Swamp Thing's stuck in all the gears. That's kind of the cliffhanger we left off. And Trinity came in to kind of like say her piece, and the Wanderer's like doesn't even want to hear what she's got to say, but the gears themselves are like, no, we want to hear this. This is relevant to our interests. And ultimately, the final story here becomes about this idea that she could either represent the repercussions and therefore the destruction of how she was created, or be something that's created for joy, something that can actually do some good. And then it kind of extrapolates from there. And obviously we had the example of the old man being kind to her, and that kind of taught her some nice things. And the humanity that she's gotten from Levi and the history of human beings and stuff. But it's kind of, Swamp Thing then kind of comes in and sort of continues this idea about how it's always been about choice. It's always like this choice. Like, industry itself can be about greed, it can be about the capitalism, or it can be about innovation. It can be about making things better. And you can choose to be that. That could be the choice that you make as a parliament. Yeah,
because the parliament represents, so the avatars represent the idea, but the parliament are the ones that make the choice of what they're going to represent. And and I like that. I'd never thought about that before. Like, I always talk about how much I love the Charles Soule run because he did all these kind of Green Lantern-esque parliaments, right, where you had the fungus and the bacteria and the information, and right, and that was all cool as like character stuff. But it's Ram V that's taken them that these avatars are personification of ideas, and those ideas are shaped by the parliament who are making the choices. And that was something I had never thought before. So that they put it here, and that the green, when we've looked at the green and some of the choices they've made in the past, and it's led to
oh yeah, they're not always good choices. No. They're not always for the better of
right.
humans,
then,
certainly.
So when you look back and think about these Swamp Thing runs and each of the choices the Parliament to make, it works on that meta level too, right? And
later on in the issue, the whatever part of the Parliament chose Levi to be an avatar talks about how, oh no, like the innocence of him up in that tree swinging at the edge of the forest, and like the idea that his heart was learning how to fly, and that's partly why they chose him, because there was this innocence to him. Right. So the idea that even the avatar as well is this influence that if they pick the right one will encourage them to make the right choice is kind of an interesting idea as well. But you get this 2-page layout where Swamp Thing's explaining some of this, and you get like both good and bad things that come from certain technologies. You get the explosions, but you also get the medicine that comes from it. You get the the toxic waste, but then you also get the regrowth of things, and weapons versus other things. There's good and bad things that can come from anything.
Yeah, which we kind of were hitting on in the last issue when Trinity was getting closer, and what she represented from where she was born, and how nuclear power can be this ultimately destructive force, but it also paves the way for the future, and that's some good storytelling there. That was seeded and then it pays off.
Well, that's not the only seed. There's a seed way back at the start of the run that's brought up here. Right. Where the Wanderer, said something to the effect of, what happens when two ideas clash, one consumes the other, and Swamp Thing corrects him here and says, no, when two ideas meet, there's a choice. It's not that one consumes, there is a choice.
Right.
And ultimately, they do convince the Parliament of Gears to make the choice, and it seems like Trinity becomes the new avatar of the Parliament of Gears, because she's also created by, a man-made thing. She's also this product of industry, military industry specifically, but
but at the same time, it's what she's a little bit more pure in that the Pale Wanderer was put together, right? He was a choice in of himself, of the corporation, right? He's
Trinity's a natural byproduct of what was already happening.
She's a natural byproduct of the sand and decisions that were made, and so she's a little bit more free to be what she wants, and she's not going to try to exert her control over the Parliament the way that the Wanderer would. And I like that dichotomy between the two.
Yeah, it kind of it's interesting to me because it kind of makes this Wanderer the what you call it? Woodrow, right? So Woodrow is the Swamp Thing, what the Wanderer now is to Trinity, and that he's this negative force and influence on the Parliament of Gears.
Well, and you have that in the Arcanes as well, right? With Abby and Anton, right?
Yeah. Well, they come from the Rot, though, right? Like Anton Arcane.
But that's what I mean. But like, that's what I learned from the Scott Snyder Swamp Thing, right? Is like all three of those parliaments that we use in that book were trying to be in harmony with one another, right? You don't want one to get more powerful than the others.
Oh, I know where you're coming from, but I'm just saying in this comparison, I don't think it fits because I'm saying that they're both specific to industry in the same way that Woodrow is also messing with the green.
Okay.
And he's this negative influence on the green versus Swamp Thing. Like, so with the industry, it's the same thing here, where Trinity is this positive, and we didn't know for sure she was going to be a positive force up until, it was kind of leaning that way, but this was kind of the final coming out party of that. But
also, you don't think that Anton is in that same negative force on the Rot, wanting to use it to, cause death and destruction versus renewal in the way that we saw Abby?
Well, maybe it is, but like, what's the positive force of the Rot then?
Well, that's the whole renewal, right? That's the whole circle of life that we got to at the end of that Snyder run. Is that when Abby takes over, it's death's a natural part of life, and the Rot is what seeds things back to the earth, and it helps add to the balance.
Oh, sure, but my point is that he's not that to Swamp Thing because he's a part of a different parliament. He's
right.
He's a different force, so
right. Well, that's why he said Abby and Anton.
I guess I kind of see it. I feel like I don't know if it fits perfectly because obviously that was written before this and it didn't have that idea in mind when it was coming together.
And when you think back to the Future State stuff, where we see that there's these other Swamp Things in the future, and that they seem to represent different aspects of Swamp Things that we've met, and one of them is very Woodrow-esque, so that's been there since Ram V's, that's been at the forefront of his mind since. And even him showing up in Justice League Dark in that way, too.
I do think that's a conscious choice that he's looked at this relationship that Swamp Thing and Woodrow have always had in Swamp Thing stories and kind of like built this dichotomy into industry as well, which just makes it feel fuller. It makes it feel more real. There's a great page when the Wanderer is basically refusing to give up power, where Swamp Thing tackles them, and it's like they're falling out the sky into this industrious city. So it's all this like yellow city from a distance, they're falling into.
Right.
It looks like a sort of like bird's eye shot that they're falling down into with these like vertical panels, and it just looks like a massive industry without any like signifiers of anything specific. So just it has that feeling of just a massive parts.
Industry for the sake of industry instead of for a cause,
So Swamp Thing grows this, and he's the Wanderer says, "I'll be back. I'll always come back because there'll always be greed, there'll always be corruption, and more reasons to exist." And he's right. And Swamp Thing says, "Well, yeah, but every time there's a chance for a better choice. Like the choice will always be there, and we have to hope and convince the people to make the right one." So there's a lot of really inspirational ideas and a lot of good themes just kind of baked in here.
Yep. And this is where I was like, I would like Ram V to stop being so good at what he does, please, because I've thought about this book. I read it on Thursday, and I keep coming back to certain things of it. And I can't say, as much as I love comic books, as much as I love Philip Kennedy Johnson's Action Comics because of Superman, just this whole thing of like, you'll come back, but that's another battle we have to win, And there's just there's hopefulness in that. and it really lands. And it's, the way that this begins too, with that little city of Destino, just the idea that's the Spanish word for destiny, and that's, about choice as well. It's baked into every part of this book.
Yeah. And then obviously once this tree grows, you get this great full page spread of the tree towering above the industrial city that has moss like over a lot of it now. It's coexisting. There's trees mixed in with the industry. Which is kind of how you have to look at it. The book's never trying to say that we don't need some form of industry, we don't need technology, because of course we do, but there's this peaceful coexistence.
It's about that balance. And again, that's what I like about these characters is, you can't have the good without the bad, so let's try to work as best as we can. And when that gets thrown out of balance, that's where we get the conflict, and that's where we get really good Swamp Thing stories.
Yeah, and that's when the narration from someone in the Parliament of trees seems to take over, and talks about the industry making their choice to be what it is now. That Trinity is now their avatar, and the choice to make Levi an avatar. And he takes Jen out there to where he used to swing as a kid, and the roots that his father made him touch. And there's this great moment where his father said, "What do you see or what do you feel when you touch those roots?" And Jen asks him the same questions now, and he just smiles. There's a great panel where he smiles, and then the next page is this full page. It could be a poster of Swamp Thing just holding his arms up with the sun in the background, surrounded by trees. And it's like this very kind of peaceful, like serene, idyllic kind of moment where he's one with nature now. So that's right, and that's when the Wanderer shows up again to be like, hey, you think you've won, but I'll be back. And he's like, yeah, maybe you're right, but there'll always be a choice, and as long as there's a choice, there's always a better one, and that's all we can hope for. So it just ends with him walking into the forest after he says that. It's a beautiful ending. It kind of sums up a lot of the themes that it's been playing with this whole time. I think the ideas of the Parliament of Gears and industry, I think, really captivated me. This is shot into. I mean, I'd have to really stop and think about it. I'm sure one day we'll do a list, but this is probably something like in my top 20 DC runs.
Easily.
Yeah, I don't want to say top 10 because there's a lot of good runs, but top 20 for sure.
This is up there just because, and it's a full story. Right, I'm so glad we got these last 6 to really pull everything together, because we really enjoyed the first 10.
Yeah, I've said this a few times. I really enjoyed the first 10 and found a lot to love in them. There's a few really standout issues in there, but these last 6 brought it all together. It's a sort of thing we would never have known. But once we got to issue 12 or 13, the one that really let into the industry stuff, I was like, oh god, imagining this run without this part of it now, it sounds depressing, because this is.
It really takes it up to a next level, because the story really comes to its own, where the first 10 are a fine story about Swamp Thing and him fighting, the whole struggle with him and his brother versus I always forget the name of the company, but is it Pilgrim?
It was, but I was going to say Wayland Yutani as a joke, but yeah, sure, it's Pilgrim.
Yeah, gotcha. with Pilgrim and what that represents, but yeah, here when we get the guy that was running Pilgrim, fusing with the Pale Wanderer, and that being a representation of greed, and now he's going to use that for the Parliament of Gears. And then we get Trinity, which I remember the first time we got that, I was like, where is this going? Like, what's this represent? And looking up Trinitite and finding out that it's a real thing, and people tried to make money off of it, and it made people sick. And how does this fit in with the story? Just each issue has peeled back an even bigger layer until we get to this really hopeful ending, which it seemed like at the beginning we were so far away from that. It seemed like everything was bad, and what is it? Do we even need Swamp Thing, like in the sense of the world in the book? No, here's a guy that looked through and where he's at peace with his place in the world.
Yeah,
and it's just, man, it's super hopeful, and I feel like we need more of that.
No, I think it took the character and did things that felt like, and it felt ingrained into what Swamp Thing's always been, but did a lot of new things with it as well. and there were new things that kind of really stoked my imagination. So I loved it. It was a fantastic run. This final issue capped it off perfectly, and I really have very little negative to say about it. So
I have one thing, and that it's over, and now I don't have anything to look forward to.
But it has to. That's the thing. If it just kept going, it would eventually dwindle because the point of what it was would fade. Like much like a good TV show, you have to end. You have to end the story.
No, and I agree, and I say it mostly as a joke but Swamp Thing became one of those books where I was like eagerly waiting for it, you know, and I would sit down and make sure I have time. Like I don't want to be interrupted while I'm reading it.
Oh yeah,
you know, and it was a whole thing, and it's been a while since I've had a book like that. So, and I'm very thankful for Ram V and Mike Perkins, and also how somehow Perkins got even better with each issue.
Yeah, it was kind of like this weird rise of Tour de Force where he started off really good and a perfect fit for the material, but then as time went on, it's like he was just getting better and better. All these little things with the faces, especially in their expressions, and just how moody or sinister some of it could be. You know, it kept building.
And then we always say that Perkins works best with the shadows, but towards the end of this, man, he's playing with light. Like we're talking some of the Green Lantern stuff, and at the end of this book with that page that you brought up with the Swamp Thing standing in the sun, there's like no shadows, and it looks even better. And so just him constantly changing things up and keeping us on our toes via the art is super, super good.
Yeah, perfect match for the material. Couldn't have asked for a better pair, really. So, I guess for the final 10, I'll ask, what are you giving Swamp Thing?
I'm giving this one a 10.
Yeah, I'm going to go 9.5, and that's just because it's not my favourite issue of the run. There's one or two issues that I gave a 10 to, and I'm letting them stay the peak of the book, but I'm going to give this a 9.5. Fantastic run, though. Couldn't recommend it more, to be honest, especially if you like Swamp Thing as a concept.